Hello, this is Cheap Books, and I'm going to explain to you the tech tree on World of Tanks, specifically what tanks you should not play and which tanks you should play. Now, my goal is to get every Tier 10 tank and the Tier 8 tanks that get up there. These are the ones that you play the most. And we've got all these different tech trees. However, there's some tanks you don't have to play. I'm going to give you some examples. You can see here that after you play the M3 Lee, you've got the T1 Heavy and the M4, and the T1 Heavy goes to the M6, and you get to the T29. Now, the T29 is a great tank, and it leads to this T11OE5. However, there's two ways to get a T29. You can either get the T1 Heavy and the M6, or you could get the M4 and the M4A3E2. Now, you might think, just pick one, but actually if you get the M4 and the M4A3E2, you can also get the T20, which brings you up to the M48 patent, and you can't get that with the T1 Heavy or the M6. So if you get the M3 Lee and up to the M4 and pick one of these two, you can get up to the M48 patent. Now you see that there's the M4A3E8 and the M4A3E2. If you get the 3E8, you can get the Jackson, and from the Jackson, you can get up to the T110E3. So if you get the M3 Lee, the M4, the M4A3E8, you can get all three of these Tier 10 tanks. So you don't want to play the T1 Heavy, the M6, or the M4A3E2. T1 Heavy is one of my favorite tanks. I got great games out of it. It was one of my top two tanks. I got better games in my Tier 8 games. But this is to show you the fastest way to get to the Tier 10 is to skip that. Now over here, you've got the T49 and the Wolverine. And you'll notice again, if you go the Wolverine line, you can get the Hellcat, which goes up to this Tier 10, or you can get the Jackson, which goes up to this Tier 10. If you get the T49, you can go up to the T28 prototype, and from here you could get the T28, which leads to both of these Tier 10s. So if you had this choice, you'd want to get the M8A1, the T49, up to the T28 prototype, and you can skip all of these tanks right here. That's 4 tanks you can skip over and still get these 2 Tier 10s. From here, you can obviously go down this route, or you can get the Chaffee, which takes a lot of playing to get the Chaffee, and move up to here and go across. The Chaffee is a good tank. It's a fast, light tank that you can use in these higher tier battles. I chose not to get it because I didn't want to play the 55,000 experience, but it's pretty much your choice. If you go the artillery way, you might get there faster than if you go the route of the Chaffee. So let's look at the UK line. Over here, you can see that this artillery line and this heavy tank line and this tank destroyer line all come through the Valentine and the Cruiser 2 and the Cruiser 1. So it splits over here and up to here and up to here. You can get all these Tier 10 tanks by getting this Cruiser 2 and the Valentine. So that's the fastest way to do it, and you can skip the Electo, the AT2, etc. The German line, you're going to have the same thing. If you look here at the bottom, you want to get the Leopard 1. You don't have to play this lower line, and you don't have to play this middle line. You could pick one of the two. I played up until Tier 6, and I didn't have to. When I realized that, I stopped playing. I'd never purchased this VK2801 because I realized I could get it right through here, and I'm going to skip these tanks. I'm going to skip these 2 tanks. Over here, you can do the same thing. If you skip the 3601 and the Tiger 1, you can get these 2 tier tanks through the Panther line. Over here, as you can see, the Tiger P leads to the Mouse, and it also leads through the Ferdinand up to this tank destroyer. I think the Ferdinand might be a new tank for this patch, which is why I stopped playing. I never bought this Jag Panzer. The Stug 3 is a great tank. I highly recommend that you play the Stug 3. It's one of the critical tanks in the game that you're going to love playing. As you can see here from the Martyr 2, you can get this tank line, and this tank line. So you don't need to play the Bison, the Wesp, or the Panzer 4B. French tanks. Now with the French tanks, the only crossover you're going to have is right here. When you get to this AMX 12T, which is a pretty good tank, the lower level French tanks are not very good, but the upper level French tanks are very good tanks. So you can go from the AMX 12T, you can get this artillery unit, and you don't have to play these tanks, and you can get up to this tier 10. The Russian line is going to have a lot of crossover. The KV-1 is a very key tank in the game. From the KV-1 you can get this artillery. You can go across here to get the IS-4. You can go across here to get the IS-7. You can go up through here to get the T-62A and the Object 140. So the KV-1 leads to all of these tanks. To get these two tank destroyer tanks, you should either play the tank destroyer line or the line up to the T-34. It's going to be your choice. After the T-34, I went to the T-34-85, and then I realized that I didn't have to continue playing it because I could get these tanks through the KV-1S line. From the KV-1S line I went to the KV-13 and then the T-43, and I had stopped playing that tank. The Chinese tanks, you could either go on this upper level and get this tier 10, or you could go through the mid-level and split here and get this tier 10 and this tier 10. So I chose not to take the light tank route because it only leads to one tier 10, and I took the medium tank route because from there it branches off into both tier 10s. So that's how you can skip playing. I skipped these three tanks. You could skip these two, the MT-25. You can skip all of these over here. You could skip all of these over here. You can skip all these tanks. The German, there's a lot of tanks in here that you can skip. For example, all of these over here, you can skip all of this. You can skip these two. You could skip all of these tanks into here. You could skip these tanks. British line, you can skip all these tank destroyers. You can skip the Birch gun, the Sexton, and the Lloyd gun carrier. And then over here you can skip the T1 Heavy, the M6. You can skip these artillery units. You have a lot of different options for how to play this out. You could either skip these tanks over here. Okay, so you have a lot of choices, and it will save you a lot of gameplay if you want to head straight for those tier 10s.